Hello, this is Spencer Patrick and welcome to A Word of Faith. Today I'd like to talk about Know Your Man. Know Your Man. This message is directed for wives. You know, there's a lot of dysfunctional marriages in Japan here. There's a lot of people that the husband and wives, they had children and then there's nothing else that happens after that. And we have a lot of frustrated people, a lot of dysfunction. That's not God's plan. Will you turn with me and let's look, I've showed this to you before, let's look at it again. 1 Corinthians 7:3. 1 Corinthians 7:3 says, "Let the husband render to his wife the affection due to her, and likewise also the wife to her husband." And then skip down to let's read verse 4. "The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does." Verse 5. "Do not deprive one another, except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." Today I want to talk to wives because I think that there's a huge misconception in marital relationships about the husband and wife. You know, husbands and wives are created differently. Men and women are created differently. Let me tell you a little bit about that. So women are based on emotions and more feeling, and is my husband taking care of me? You know, am I okay financially? You know, what's my husband doing? What does he do every day? Men are you know, we don't have a menstrual cycle. Men don't have a menstrual cycle, but there's a very, very strong sexual desire. And that sexual desire is not something that has to be put down. It's something that God created in us, and it's something that can be fulfilled in the marriage relationship. But what happens a lot is women, I think, and men don't understand each other. Today I'm talking about women. You should know your man. I'll talk again later about men, know your wife. So women, know your husband. And so what is your husband? See, men don't have the menstrual cycle, but they have a desire. And I see it as kind of a monthly or more type of desire that needs to be fulfilled. Men are driven by what they see. So if you're in Japan here, you see on the train, you see advertisements in the train of women with their busts hanging out, because men look at that stuff. It's interesting that women, there's nothing really targeted towards women in this area, because women don't really, that doesn't really draw them like men. Men are driven by what they see. That's why it's important that we're supposed to live by faith and not by sight. But at the same time, men have those desires. I know that, and I've heard many times, that if a man is not being fulfilled with his wife, he starts to look other directions. And as a wife, this is the last thing that you want to do. The last thing you want is your husband looking at every single person, every woman that walks by. That's not God's plan. That's why here it says, don't deprive yourself from sexual relations except with a mutual consent. This is 1 Corinthians 3:5. Why? Because the enemy is going to attack if you allow that to happen. If you value your marriage, you better make an effort to fulfill each other. And wives, you can't use sex as a weapon. You can't take it away from your husband and expect to keep your marriage strong. You have to work at it just as much as he does. And you need to understand your man. God has an awesome desire to fulfill your marriage through you and your husband, but you will not do it by depriving one another. The enemy will use that, and at the same time there's natural desires built into the man that need to be fulfilled sexually. And if you don't fulfill those desires, he's going to start going somewhere else. I remember one time I was listening to some talk show. It wasn't a Christian talk show, but some woman had called in. She said, my husband's cheating on me, or something like that, or I can't even remember if it was actually cheating, that he's talking a lot to other women. And it was fascinating to me, because the woman who was the host of that show, she hit the nail on the head. I didn't even see it coming. What she did was she said, "Well, Miss Wife, you've got kids, you're depriving your husband, you're not spending time with your husband." And she hit that, and suddenly that woman was quiet. You're withholding yourself from your husband. And so that woman was quiet. And then the announcer said, "That's true, right?" And the woman said, "Yes." And at that point I realized that, sometimes these guys go off and they cheat on their wives and they do things, but at the same time, they should not sin. It's the man has to control themselves. But at the same time, there's a wife's responsibility as well. God has a desire to fulfill each other in our marriages. So I wanted to encourage you today to know your man, to know your husband, because the better you know your husband, the better relationship you'll have with him. This is Spencer Patrick, and thank you for joining me on A Word of Faith. Something good is going to happen to you in your marriage because you believe. Hallelujah.